All right, welcome to the Lovecraft E-Zine podcast. This is August the 26th, 2018, and our guest today is Jeremy Robert Johnson. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
Greetings. Going good?
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Before we get to Jeremy, let's do introductions, of course. I want to mention a couple of things, though. As of today, A Long, Dark, Grim Road by Joseph S. Pulver Sr. Not sure who that is. Joe Pulver, our friend Joe Pulver, A Long, Dark, Grim Road is available. And Lovecraft E-Zine Press. If you buy the print version on Amazon, then the Kindle version is only 99 cents. And, you know, as you can see by the title, A Long, Dark, Grim Road, it's kind of a uplifting book. It reminds me of, I don't know, maybe Anne of Green Gables or Princess Bride, maybe something like that, you know. So cheerful life lesson in there. No, it's a very, very good book.
It's a very nice cover.
Yes, it is. Dave Felton, thank you for reminding me of that. Mm-hmm. Dave Felton did a great job. Kenneth Kane did a great job formatting it. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Dave. If you're listening to this later, I want to make everybody aware, because I'm not sure that everybody is aware, that there's 3 different ways you can consume this show. You can watch live, as some people are doing now. And the benefit of that is that you can, you know, live chat along with us alongside the video while it's going on. Or, of course, you can watch the video later, which a lot of people do. And then many more people listen to it on the go. It's available. Just Google Lovecraft E-Zine podcast, or search for Lovecraft E-Zine podcast on iTunes. So, all right, introductions. Let's start with Heather and work our way over, and then we'll get to Jeremy.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Heather Landry. I'm a horror artist who has done some cover art for Lovecraft E-Zine and for Philip. And I'm at samfeverdaisy.com.
All right, Rick.
Rick Lay, writer.
Philip, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, you're not hungover, are you?
I'm sore. I'm minorly hungover. On a scale of 1 to hungover, I'm a 12.
You know what you really need is a greasy, nice, fat, greasy sausage sandwich.
Oh yeah,
right.
Beat me to it.
Plus some more alcohol.
I follow that myth of if you keep eating bread, it'll absorb all of the acidic alcohol in your system. But I don't know if that's true. But I've been eating a lot of.
It apparently is not.
No, it hasn't done jack diddly. So Philip Fracassi, I am a author and a screenwriter.
Okay, and you've got a contest, not a contest, a giveaway going with Shiloh that we'll get to later. After we speak with Jeremy. So,
dope.
And Pete.
Pete Rawlik, writer, and I've seen Meg, so you don't have to.
I will not see it, even if it's free to watch on Netflix.
I liked it.
No.
All right. No. Well, that says a lot. Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young, executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
Feeling
I saw
good.
Meg as well, and I didn't like it.
There was Big Sharks, Kelly. I don't know if you saw that. Big Sharks.
You've got a new issue of Strange Eons coming up pretty soon, but, you know, I thought you were going to mention something else in your introductions from now on.
Also, part of the Dead Again podcast. Just recorded another episode this morning, and hey, thanks for everybody who has listened and chimed in and everything. It's been really, really fantastic. So thank you, and thank you, Mike, for mentioning it on the E-Zine boards.
Oh, no problem.
I'm sorry. It's called Dead Again is the name of the podcast.
Dead Again. Yes, we just did a Jaws. We just released a Jaws podcast, and we just recorded a Mad Max Fury Road today.
Dead Again. That was such a great movie. That's what you guys talk about, right?
Yeah, it's all about the movie Dead Again. It's all about Kenneth Branagh and Robin Williams.
So it's funny. I almost walked out of that
Thompson,
movie because I thought it was stupid. because it was telling the point of the story from the wrong points of view for each character.
I saw it in the theater and I liked it. I haven't really
Yeah,
seen it
I
since
remember
then. That
liking
was 2 centuries ago or
Are
something.
we supposed to take anything that he said seriously after he just said he liked the Meg?
I enjoyed the
that's,
Meg.
That's true. Very true.
I got home very late last night for a night out, and my son was up, and he was like, and he said, "Hey, let's watch Mad Max Fury Road," and I was like, "Sure." And so we were up to like 3:30 in the morning watching Mad Max Fury Road. So I'll look forward to listening to that podcast, Kelly, because it's a great movie.
Fantastic. We'll have to get you on sometime, actually.
All right, and Benjamin.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm just a fan here to taunt, various people on the podcast.
Exactly. Ben is a Patreon member, and he's at the level where he can join us on the podcast sometimes. So if you, as we said last time, if you don't like this show, join Patreon, and there'll be more episodes available only to Patreons that you won't like either.
Is there a level of Patreon where I can veto other patrons?
$1,000 a month.
I'll see what I can do.
I think the motto for the Zine podcast could be, "There's a lot here to dislike." Just
Right at the bottom. Yeah, I think so.
at the bottom.
Jeremy's like, when the fuck are they going to get to me? I am the guest, for God's sake. Hey, Jeremy, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
I'm the hungover guy is gonna start interviewing you, and I'll join in later. But just real quick, for those, I think a lot of people listening know who you are, but for those who don't, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm Jeremy Robert Johnson. I'm the author of SKULLCRACK City and Entropy in Bloom, and most recently the novella In the River. And I've been around a while, and I am here now.
All right.
Yeah.
Well said. Philip.
Yeah, well, Pete didn't get to introduce himself. Should I worry about that, or should I just go ahead, proceed?
No, he introduced himself.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Didn't you, Pete?
I think it was.
I absolutely did.
His
I
daughter's
hope so.
eating pork butt, and that's like,
Have another drink, Phil.
Smoking it. How dare you?
Yeah.
and
Kelly,
here
you
was,
always have another drink.
that's what I get for
I
caring.
guess I will then.
That's what I get
You
for
know
caring.
what's nice is that, and I was flattered. Jeremy told me that he watches the shows, so our level of unprofessionalism already in this episode, he's used to seeing. So yeah, Philip, maybe you can bring it up a level and
There's
interview.
a lot here to dislike. Yeah. Let's talk about Jeremy. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really have a trajectory for my question, so I'll just kind of, but I've been a reader of Mr. Johnson's for a while. I was introduced to Jeremy via We Live Inside You, which is a collection from, I don't know, what, 10 years ago, Jeremy?
2011.
Oh, so 7 years ago. And then realized that Jeremy actually has been publishing regularly and steadily since like 2005. Is that right?
Yeah. That's when had one book that I collaborated on with Alan M. Clark earlier 2003 that was out on a limited bloodletting. But as far as any books that started reaching people, 2005 was when Angel Dust Apocalypse came out.
Right, Angel Dust Apocalypse, and that's a novel. I haven't read that one.
Oh, that's my first collection.
Oh, that's the first collection. Okay, and yeah, so and then Entropy in Bloom is sort of a like a selected stories almost, right? Because it pulls from all your earlier collections.
Yeah, the idea was just to take the two, very independent Bizarro collections, Angel Dust Apocalypse and We Live Inside You, kind of cull the most, overtly commercial. They're still not that commercial, but the closest we had to kind of mainstream horror fiction, put that into one book, and then kind of try to expose that to a wider audience beyond the Bizarro readership. And Nightshade pulled it off, and they did a great job. So.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful book, and so I guess then I have read Angel Dust Apocalypse because I've read Entropy in Bloom, so I just didn't realize that there was all the stories. But yeah, it's really cool, and I was very curious about that. So it's interesting to me that they pulled stories that were specific to kind of had the the broader feel to specifically to reach a larger audience. I think that's really fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen a collection that was part of earlier collections like that, other than like a selected stories kind of thing, where it's something they do as a as a catalog of the earlier stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was like closer to like a posthumous omnibus kind of setup, but it's happening while I'm here, and I got to curate it and stuff and work with them on the choices. So that was super fun. And then I told them for my existing readership, I didn't want to just sell them the same 2 books over again. And I asked them if I could write a new novella to kind of anchor the thing. And so I wrote a new one called Sleep of Judges that we put into the end of the book.
Great
kind
story.
Ties in. Oh, thanks. Ties into SKULLCRACK City, which was the book that got their attention in the first place. So yeah, it was a really cool idea that the editors had, and I'm really happy we ended up doing it. And it was really fun after 18 years in the industry to have people discover me overnight.
Right.
There's like a large chunk of the kind of mainstream horror readership that was like, you got to check out this new guy, Jeremy Robert Johnson. And I was like, try not to feel like, really that new.
Yeah. Well, I hear people like say that about like Paul Tremblay and Laird Barron, where they're like overnight sensations who have been working at it for over 10 years. But I guess it's when people get to know you in a broader sense. And then one thing that was of interest to me to ask you about, and without trying to overly label anything, because that's not the idea, but just out of curiosity as a writer, your earlier stuff is definitely more in the bizarro world.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, and please correct me, is that the more recent stuff you tend to be getting a little bit more a little more of literary horror, almost like a more traditional kind of literary horror, and less bizarro. And I don't know if that's A, accurate, or B, if that's something that you purposely are doing, or C, if it's just like the natural course of writing over a period of 13 years.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a shift as far as the content, and a lot of the earlier fiction that qualified as bizarro was me experimenting with form and teaching myself how to write anyway. And then I found what I gravitated towards was more literary horror, and so it was just kind of a natural growth out of anything goes experimentation into finding out what I really like to write and what moves me. And also I'm 40 instead of 20 now, and so my frame of reference and interests and all that. I don't know if anybody wants, a dad writing a bunch of crazy, drugged out, shape shifting fiction anymore. As far as that, because it's not it wouldn't be inherently the kind of thing I would do well at anymore. Because I feel like I exploited those experiences, and now I have new terrifying things like children to write about.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm interested to see what you're going to do next, which is something I'd like to touch on as well. But having read In the River, maybe just talk about that for a second, because In the River, which is a novella, which is definitely horror, but it's also really it's a drama, or it's a story about a man and losing his son, and there's a lot of a lot of emotion in it, and it's really beautifully told. But it's definitely not like a traditional horror story. It's much more about this man's journey. And I wanted to ask you, because I know that when this book was released, there was a charity attached to it where proceeds were going to a shelter. Is that right? So I was just wondering if you could talk about how In the River came about, and how you got attached to that particular charity. And if you want to plug the charity too, that would be.
Yeah, In the River just came from kind of a natural outpouring of emotion I felt for once I had a child. All of a sudden I recognized, that becomes the onus of a lot of writers' source of, like, Tremblay is writing what I call dad horror, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of, and you can see, The Shining and Pet Cemetery, and you go back through King's work, you can definitely see the shift when a person attaches to that sort of kind of greatest source of fear, and it's that attachment to the child and the loss of the child. And so I was just, having those things where you wake up at 3 a.m. terrified about the idea of losing a kid. And I decided, to delve into that because it felt like such a taboo, even in stuff like, The Walking Dead or The Road. So much of the tension and the drive in those stories centers from the idea of a father keeping a son alive. And I was thinking, what happens if you try to tell a story where from the get-go you take away that, and what you're experiencing is the flip side of that, and their struggle to survive inside their grief. When you take away hope, what's the story for the guy in The Road whose son gets eaten by cannibals in the first chapter, and so that was kind of where I came from, and then just tried to express that in a really almost fable-like format, just to experiment with form, to keep it interesting to me. And then the charity was Portland Homeless Family Solutions, that works here in Portland to develop long-term housing and actual, long-term solutions for families who are out on the streets, and getting them back into a situation where they have both temporary housing and food and water right away, and then helping them get to a point where they can have a place where they can really stay and live. So it just felt like, for something that was so innately about family and love and loss, that was a good, a fitting charity to give those royalties to when it launched. So yeah.
That's very cool. And who handled the publishing duties on In the River?
The now deceased Lazy Fascist Press. I actually I came to them after the shakeout at Permuted Press, when things went sideways there a while back, with SKULLCRACK City, and I said, hey, this is a risky book. Do you want to take it on? And to sweeten the pot, I offered them a novella. I said, if you're willing to publish this book, then I'll get you another novella just in case this thing tanks on us. And it didn't tank. It did.
No, it did pretty well.
But on the back end, I still had that contract out there. And so, yeah, I kind of wrote the least commercial, most experimental novel I could get away with, because I knew, hey, I'm working with Nightshade now. Let's see what I can get away with over at Lazy Fascist Press. Let's see how strange and unique it can get. So that was the strategic approach, and they proved to still be the best house for that kind of work. And they put it out and then closed their doors and just kept the books in distribution. So that was it. I went from a kind of a sellout commercial book, and then 5 months later, the most indie book you can do, literally put it out as the last gasp of a dying press. But Cameron's book design is phenomenal. Matthew Rivera's cover I absolutely love, and I'm so happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, and speaking of, because Lazy Fascist, they did SKULLCRACK City as well, right?
They did, yeah.
And so is that going to be reissued, or is that still being distributed under the Lazy Fascist banner?
That is still out under Lazy Fascist. All their distribution basically went to their parent company, which was Eraserhead. They always operated as one of those kind of tentacles of the Bizarro thing, but they had the more literary and experimental leanings, and that was kind of their niche. So now Rose at Eraserhead is tending to all the Lazy Fascist library and keeping those things in print. And then there is interest, when that contract's up, to try and get a new version of SKULLCRACK City out to kind of keep it in motion, but that's a couple years away.
Right. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the movie. We talked a little bit before we got on the air, but a couple of years ago, When Susurrus Stirs, one of your short stories was made into a film that was on the festival circuit, and we talked about your Fantastic Fest shirt now, and I saw it had a chance to see it at the Stoker Awards, Stoker Con.
Final Frame. That was a cool one.
Yeah, Final Frame. And I remember texting you saying, hey, dude, I think you just won. Remember that? Can you talk a little bit about When Susurrus Stirs? And then, if you don't mind, if there's stuff that you can talk about for future film, TV adaptation of your work? What's going on that front?
Susurrus Stirs was just a there was a filmmaker, Anthony Cousins, who had found We Live Inside You, and he said the moment he read the story, which is kind of the most it's the closest I've ever got to Ed Lee territory. It's absolutely the most graphic thing I've ever written. He said right away he knew he had to turn it into a movie, and I thought he was nuts. I was like, that's the last thing you can ever film. There's no way you can film that story. And then he proceeded to prove me wrong, and he got his special effects guy Ryan Shadley on the phone with me, and we spent about an hour talking about The Fly and The Thing and practical effects and how passionate they were about getting back to practical effects, how bad CGI tentacles look, and how they promised they weren't going to do any of that stuff, and I was on board, and we did a Kickstarter, got the thing funded within 20 days, and they shot it within a couple weeks, and turned out fantastic, just beyond my dreams of what they could have done with that story. And then it really took off, and I got to watch it at the Lovecraft Festival actually here in Portland. And there's a scene towards the end that's an incredibly graphic scene. The Lovecraft Festival made us a special warning, just basically like a trigger warning for people to know what was coming with this one particular film if they wanted to leave the theater. And the people who stayed, about 2/3 of the way through, they start ducking further and further down in their seats.
Oh, funny.
So I learned when you go to festivals, sit at the back, watch people start flinching, and then when the end finally hits, they just go crazy, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's insane!" And people are either gasping or laughing, because it's how else do you respond to the film like that?
Can I jump in with a quick question?
Yeah.
I saw the trailer for that, and yeah, it looks great.
It's gruesome as heck. Yeah.
What is it available now for people to watch?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, it's on
it's
on Vimeo.com right now.
Okay.
It's over there. The YouTube had some censorship and standards issues with the final minute of the film, and so we realized it was Vimeo doesn't seem to have those same concerns content wise. And so they popped it up there for us. And then Bloomhouse, actually, Rebecca McKendry from Shockwave's podcast came up to Anthony at one of the festivals and said, "Hey, we love this. We'd love to be the folks to do a kind of a digital debut." And so they launched it for us as the goriest short film of the year. And we got a lot of views off of that, and it was super fun. And now it's just kind of sitting out there on Vimeo, like a dare for people to watch.
All right. Back to you, Philip. I was just curious about that.
Yeah. So I guess you just go to Vimeo and search "When Sorceress Stirs," and I would love to watch it again, because I haven't seen it since the festival, and it's a pretty nutty film, and especially the practical effects are hilarious because you just, to your point, you don't see it anymore, and when you see a practical effect on the screen, especially with the kind of stuff they were doing, it really has a different kind of impact than like something, because it's so it's not perfect, and it's not super slick, and it's not super clean, but it almost makes it like more visceral, because you're kind of like, I don't know, you get more of like the feel of what's happening. It's a little more hard. It's a little harder to watch.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we talked about, especially one of our reference points kind of obviously was Henenlotter's Brain Damage, which is one of the goofiest things you'll ever see, along with Basket Case. It's the most rubbery protagonist in the history of film, but there's something so unsettling and kind of funny and kind of disturbing about all that Henenlotter stuff. And so we're like, okay, this is in a way, an ode to that era of, the goofy, gooey stuff that still goes for the big shocks,
Yeah, I remember I was a long time ago, I worked on a movie called Ticks, and by Giant Ticks, and like our special effects was like shampoo. Like we had this like Tic Tac thing, and we just pour like Perel shampoo over it, and they'd shoot it, because that would be like the goopy stuff that it was, the alien kind of stuff that it was coming to life inside of. But yeah, it was just shampoo, and it looked awesome.
Hold on a second. You're burying the lead here. I own Ticks. We're going to have to discuss this later in the hour.
Oh yeah.
I love that movie.
I spent about 4 weeks working on that film. But yeah, we can talk about that in the second hour, but it was pretty interesting. Mickey Dolenz' daughter, I believe, was the star.
Yep.
Amy Dolenz?
Mickey Dolenz of Monkeys fame.
Yeah.
His daughter, Amy, I think.
Yeah.
She was the lead. She was the star. And also what's his face was in it? The ugly guy.
That one.
Happy Days. That Ron Howard's brother, Clint.
That's
Clint.
Clint.
Yeah.
The
Clint Howard.
ugly guy. Oh,
Super nice, super
Howard.
nice. Well, that's his thing. Is he's like, I'm super ugly. And that's
I
like,
went to Steve Buscemi right away. You
yeah.
know,
Well,
but yeah.
I think those guys, that's what they're known for. I think it's okay.
Yeah. Have you heard that story from the set of Fargo about Steve Buscemi when he shows up for the first day of makeup? Because in the script he was described as hideously ugly man, almost like a living grown rat. And he showed up and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready. Let's hop in. Get me in the makeup chair." And the Coens told him, "Yeah." And then, no, that's cool. There's no makeup.
We're fine. We're good to go.
Ouch. Oh, ouch.
But yeah,
He's a good sport. You can tell.
Buscemi, he is a good sport. He went. That was a great man. It was such a great film. He went. He really went for it on that with that movie with his whole Buscemi look, wide-eyed, big teeth thing. So and then what do you have? What else is in the works on the film and TV side? Because I know there's stuff in the works. I don't know what you can talk about.
I finally got to that weird position where contractually stuff I could say before I can't say now until a producer does. So kind of in a but I mean I can say Sleep with Judges, the novella from the end of Entropy in Bloom, is in development. We have a great director and production company attached, and the script is in workup right now, and the director is getting ready to roll on that project. But we have to wait until the producers kind of officially announce the whole package before we could say what's happening with it. But I mean, I can say that the producers spoke with the director, and they're a really brave production company. They're kind of known for letting directors do what they want, and they've basically given him carte blanche to make this the kind of horror film that we would love to see. So I'm super excited to see if it jumps to that next step. You never know. It's like playing the lottery, but if it does, it's going to be a pretty phenomenal adaptation. So there's that. And then CAA is out there with my new novel right now in LA, going around trying to see if there's any takers. So that's very exciting. It's kind of a Dazed and Confused meets Cronenberg Shivers meets Battle Royale in a small town. So
I'm trying to piece it all together in my head right now.
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely an action horror thriller with some comedy elements, some very dark, modern kind of technology stuff like Black Mirror kind of satire to it. And we've got our fingers crossed for it. They're really thinking it's going to turn into something.
That's awesome, and it actually leads me to what I was going to ask you about next, which is what is next on the docket. You have a novel is there a release date scheduled yet for that, or? Yeah,
I wish I had a release date for it, but we have a group of editors who are waiting on it, but CAA's strategy with it right now is currently to actually sell the film rights prior to selling the novel, and they think that's a real possibility. So they're just waiting to hear on that, and then we get to talk to the publishers, and then hopefully it gets right out there, because they have to get it out ahead of the film if all that came together. So I don't know right now, but I'm on the second month of a home renovation, so it's kind of perfect timing. Right. Because it's a good distraction.
Yeah, right. You're not checking your emails every 5 minutes, wondering if they have an update for you.
Yeah.
Which is, I know how that goes. So it's not 100%. It's not not going to be Nightshade titles necessarily. It's being shopped.
Yeah. There's after SKULLCRACK City took off, there's been a lot of interest from other parties and stuff. So I've never been through this process before. I've always worked in the indie press, so I'm not sure how it goes next, but I've been told that having multiple publishers interested is to our benefit. So
yeah, you want the bidding war.
Yeah. That would be crazy.
So, and what is do you have a title?
Yeah, I guess it's called Exit Human. And it's not a sequel to SKULLCRACK City, which is one of the only other things I can say about it. It's not SKULLCRACK City 2. Right. It has a lot of that similar kind of craziness and genre mashing as the prior title. And we're super excited about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what about SKULLCRACK City? Because I know
That one has proven
popular.
Yeah, it's had a lot of film interest, but eventually they get to the end and they realize the end is too insane to film, and so nobody has been able to kind of crack that nut as far as how do you film the third act without trying to put a Marvel budget on this story that's otherwise pretty risky. So there's been talk about converting that over to a TV series, or there's been, I think at this point, 3 different directors interested in trying to figure out ways to make it work. But it's just one of those borderline unadaptable things that I'm perfectly happy with just being the novel it is and out there in the world. But it sure would be neat to see somebody take a crack at it.
There's SKULLCRACK at it.
There's no happy Hollywood ending there.
Yeah.
And I also really quick wanted to ask about, because we talked about some of your work being adapted. Have you gotten involved in the screenwriting part of things? Have you been part of your work being adapted, or have you worked on any screenplays separately from your prose fiction?
Well, it's something I'm interested in going forward. Just it seems like it's a pretty interesting way to write and maybe make enough money to survive. I've had friends that have actually abandoned like New York book deals to go do screenwriting.
Right.
Whether or not that stuff even makes it to the screen or not, they seem to be happier doing that. I've done a couple spec scripts before, but then had them not turn into anything. And one of my things I do for guidance is I go to old Joe Lansdale interviews. And I saw one where he talked about how he used to do spec scripts, and like he popped one out for Ridley Scott for The Big Blow and a couple different things. And eventually he decided, don't do spec anymore in general. And so I'm looking to that as a source of wisdom. And so, yeah, I haven't gone crazy with just generating my own scripts. I've tried to stick more to the book side. And then anything that happens with Hollywood is kind of just a magical lottery that maybe does something one day, But to me, the actual work, the novels and the novellas feel like something tangible I can control. So,
well, what's interesting, or you might find interesting, is because having worked in both fields a little bit, it's on one hand the screenplays, they do tend to have better checks when sold than a book, but on the other hand, it's kind of I don't say easier, but it's but when it's something nice about producing a book and having it published and having it come out, and then that book can very easily be, as we just talked about, optioned or bought for a screen project. And a lot of writers, and myself included, are beginning to take screenplays and adapt them to prose because it's easier to sell as a story than it is to sell as a screenplay, which is bizarre, but that's just the way Hollywood thinks. So it's really interesting. But I would love to see you take a stab at an original screenplay. I'd be kind of interested to see what that would look like.
Yeah, I'm heating up to it. I'd like to. I think that'd be fun too. And I had a friend who does screenwriting down there. This guy, Peter Craig, that did Bloodfather, and he did the screenplay for a couple of the Hunger Games films. And he told me, that I'm basically already writing in screenplay format because I'm so terse, and minimalist in my prose. And he's like, you could make the jump in a heartbeat, and it'd be a good deal for you. So, yeah. Well, as long as this horror boom is still going, it'd be a shame not to try and jump in on that. I heard if you write a Stranger Things-esque script right now, you can get it financed about 5 minutes out. So.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Yeah, the summer of '84 and all.
Yeah. Kids on Bikes fighting the supernatural. It's a dunk right now. So.
Right. Benjamin, did you want to ask a question? You can jump in if you want.
Yeah. So I read your short story, The Sharp Dressed Man. And so you wrote I guess it was published in 2013, 2012, somewhere around then?
Even earlier, I think the original, because that was included in my first collection, Angel Dust Apocalypse, I think it was first written and published in 2003.
Wow. So you're extra prescient then, is what you're saying.
Yeah. It was, I hope it would never be so timely again. And that was what all the elements in that are unfortunately hyper timely again.
I mean, even the comments you have the president making on the TV, I feel like we literally get those comments now. Maybe not on TV, but definitely on Twitter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, my hyper exaggerated, version of George W. Bush would turn into the actual current president. What was supposed to be this radically exaggerated satire would turn into modern reality was it's unsettling, honestly, because when I was typing it, I was thinking this is far too absurd, and now it's day-to-day life, which is great.
Yeah, that's what struck me as I'm reading it. I had to look. So I read it in a collection. I think it was a Bizarro fiction collection.
Yeah.
And I'm flipping, and it's like, wait, when was this written? Because if you'd written this 6 months ago, it'd be like, oh, okay, well, you're just responding to what you're seeing in the media. But then to find out that you wrote it years and years before he was even on the scene, that's impressive.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I got lucky. Lucky. I'd rather, like I said, it didn't ring a bell now. But yeah.
Yeah, he's written about the end of the world too, so we gotta worry about that.
Yeah. Well, there's a line in the book where the character realizes the president hasn't been on TV in 3 days, and that's how he knows the bombs are coming. So I'm wondering do we watch Twitter? Like if he's silent for 3 days, that's when we know,
Definitely
right?
Watch for a tweet drop off, because then they're down in the caves somewhere.
Get the cockroach suit out.
Yeah.
Heather, do you have some questions for Jeremy? I think you said you do.
There, am I unmuted? Okay.
You are.
Yeah, Jeremy, I wanted to just talk about for a minute and compliment you on some themes that I noticed in Entropy in Bloom that I thought were really awesome. I really enjoyed stories like the one where the gentleman is going to more extreme body modifications, where he's trying to join the League of Zeros. The one where the young boy in high school is willing to do anything at all just so that he can feel more alive, like he's not just sinking into lives of quiet desperation like his parents, so he's willing to do anything, including harikari, basically, things like that. And the one where the guy's all hopped up and he's trying to be all strong so he could be part of this like new bro world order and go through personal evolution. And it seemed to me like in all these cases, or the one with the cat burglar where he's trying to feel more alive by doing that, these people are trying to externally change something that they think is an important way to self-evolve, but they ultimately come to a confrontation at the end of the story where they figure out that that's not actually the way to change themselves or to achieve happiness. They actually have to rely on somebody that they didn't know loved them, or confront the father who has messed them up for their whole life, or something like that. Is that kind of what you were going for?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just, what happens when you're searching to feel something or to create some kind of change, and you make all the wrong choices on the way there, I think is an interesting approach. And just also kind of exaggerated versions of personal experience, as a distance runner who once fell in love with a stripper. I had some points of reference for different things there. Or as a person who got into straight edge and then realized a lot of those folks were addicted to physical violence. So kind of just really exaggerated versions of those different ways we try to create change, but in a way we don't see them as self-destructive until too late. Just because something has to change, sometimes the pathways there are the wrong ones, and where does that leave us? That's definitely a pretty central theme. People searching for their identity and fucking up on the way there is a big part of Entropy in Bloom for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised, to hear there's a little bit of you in those stories, because they just seem so darn genuine. Like, they really get into you more, I think, because you feel the sincerity in them. Like, I really like that about your writing. And it kind of makes me ask, because you had one very touching story about an older brother who's kind of a drifter, who's unfocused, and he has to take care of his mentally disabled brother, and he resents it. That one really touched me a lot, because I happen to have two sons, and my older son does have to take care of my younger son for reasons very similar to that. And I can see him in that guy and how he feels sometimes, how I feel so frustrated with the situation. And I was just wondering if, you really did such a wonderful job on that, if that came from anywhere in you either.
I think, yeah, when I met my wife at the exact same time, she and I were getting to know each other. Her brother was developing a pretty strong case of schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder at the same time, the schizoaffective disorder. And it was kind of in learning to meet him and learning how to work with him and help him through his mental illness, and experiencing a lot of those feelings of like care and frustration at the same time, kind of led me to that story. And then also just actually having my car break down in Bakersfield once, which is a miserable place to have your car break down on the 104-degree day.
I've been there.
Kind of
Yeah,
those two
not
things
Bakersfield
meshed
specifically,
together.
but yes. The only other thing I could think about to say was, like I'm sure pretty much everybody else, I was absolutely blown away by how you so effectively portrayed the feeling of being a parasite. Like, I never thought that I knew what a parasite thought or felt until I read that story, and the way that the man was just slowly coming to love and accept him, and the way that then it became we, and like it just takes you through the life cycle, and you really, and he talks about how it's like being in a limousine, just riding along through life, having everything flowing into you, and it's so horrifying and awful, but it's fascinating to listen to the parasite and how the parasite feels. I thought that was just amazing. Yeah. Super creepy though.
Yeah, it's I mean, that's part of what's so disturbing to me about some of these parasites, like the ones that infect the wasps. The parasitic wasps that infect the other ones, and basically the behavioral pattern of the ants change in order to nurture the stuff that's already eating away at them from the inside. That concept of, and then, other parasites that generate, the biochemical response that makes you feel love and affection for something that's slowly killing you and turning you into a food source. That concept seemed like a really disturbing one to put inside of a human being, outside of like babies and oxytocin and all the other ways that it actually happens in our own biology. So, Thanks.
You still there, Jeremy? I think you faded out a bit.
Yeah.
I hear him.
Yeah, your mic definitely faded out a bit.
Jeremy, one thing I was going to ask you about, because you touched on
or is it just me?
I think it's just, can you guys hear me?
I'm hearing you just fine.
Yeah, I think it's you, Mike. Maybe you're sitting on your volume
I
control.
can't hear anything. Can anyone else hear anything?
Yes, we're all hearing it.
I can hear everything.
All right, somebody take it. I'll
This is like when your dad has headphones on.
Figure out what's going on with my.
And he's asking you if you can. He's talking too loud. What is it?
What? What are you saying? I got headphones on.
Oh boy.
What time are the kids coming over? But anyway, I was going to ask Jeremy about the having played in both the indie field and now the more swimming with the bigger fish. What would you say are the biggest differences between the two? Between like kind of working with the really bizarro indie publishers who kind of seem to sort of come and go. Sadly, it's hard to kind of maintain, that kind of a small press, and then maybe, having worked with kind of a mid-level like Night Shift, and now, kind of hoping to having your, next novel shopped around by CAA. Like, can you describe sort of how it feels to be part of having gone through all those different business models, or for lack of a better way to put it? Because I think it seems like really fascinating.
Yeah, and it's been a very good education. I mean, it's been frustrating at times, but definitely to kind of work with a very traditional, independent, print on demand, Amazon distribution only model. And then, I ran a very small offshoot of Eraserhead called Swallowdown Press for a while that was aiming to do a lot of the same stuff as Lazy Fascist, kind of more a focus on horror and crime fiction with a weird, slant to it. And so actually publishing, some of Cody Goodfellow's early work, and We Live Inside You was a Swallowdown title, and seeing what it's like from that perspective of publishing others and working in those channels and trying to find ways to bring books to life and find those audiences, I think was hugely informative when it came time to start talking about contracts with other, bigger publishers, because it gives you a sense of how the market works, what your work is worth, what work is involved for the royalties they want to take away from you, especially if you've kind of been DIY across the whole process, and tried to do it at a professional level, how much are you willing to trade in royalties for what they can do for you? And then I have been pleasantly surprised. Like I don't know if I could go back to self-publishing or to the indie publishing, just because I've had such a positive experience with Nightshade as far as, library distribution and, seeing Entropy in Bloom in an impromptu horror section in a Barnes and Noble, or my mom being able to get a book in her hometown. There's been aspects of it of being off the Amazon grid that have been pretty fantastic, and also just reaching a general readership outside of the very small group of dedicated weirdos that really latch on to Bizarro stuff. It's been a constant learning process. So I think it's been really beneficial, and I'm interested. It's always a little bit of a learning curve to find out how it works at each of the levels, but it's been really cool, and it's given me a good sense of different stages of the industry and how it works, and if a title would work better on an indie press. There's stuff like In the River that I wouldn't have tried to take to Crown or Penguin or anybody, because it would be too much of a risk for them, or too strange, or too short. And so I feel like it's given me a good base to know how and where titles should land, and how to try and find the right readers.
Yeah, and I've noticed there's another writer who I'm buddies with, Josh Mallerman, who does, interestingly, he has, he's released his books on major publishers, Simon & Schuster and Random House, but he's has a book coming out with Cemetery Dance, because he wanted to do something, he kind of wanted to do something more like, I guess, base horror, or kind of, really kind of more throwback horror, and they just were a better fit for that title. So I find it really fascinating and I don't know how, I guess a lot of it comes down to what a publisher will allow you to do if you're under, if you have a book coming out with them or whatever. And to your point, you start learning that, while the field, while maybe your readership is growing and you're being seen by more eyeballs, at the same time, there's certain constrictions happening to your freedom is somewhat constricted to what you can do and what you can't do. It's kind of part of the what you have to, probably one of the cons to a very big pro.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing that happened after Skullcrack was different agents and editors and stuff contacted me saying, "What do you have next? And can you promise me it won't be as crazy as Skullcrack City?" Because they just for whatever reason, they were like, "That works, but I can't get away with that where I work." And so that was pretty much, that coda was at the end of everybody's message to me when they were saying, "Hey, what's coming up next?" They were like, "We'd love to see what's next, but don't do that again."
Right.
That's too fucked up.
Right.
That's been a really interesting part of it. And then realizing
we love your work. Now write differently.
Yeah, and I know when I talked to John Skip about the splatterpunk era, he definitely encountered that right away. People were like, "Can you do like a serial killer thriller? Can you do can you give us a cozy mystery?" And they're like, "Have you read what I do, and why? Have you figured out why people like it at all?" And so it was kind of that interesting thing where you have to make that call of, I don't know how to turn off my personal mode of weird. I tried to think in commercial terms, and it fell apart, I think, by the second page of my new novel. I threw myself into the deep water right away. So that part of it's been interesting. There's definitely some constrictions on what they're willing to take a risk on in the mainstream. And so that part, I may very quickly find myself back at, the small press takes risks that I admire in general. And I also love a lot of what the smaller horror presses do in terms of collectible editions and stuff like that. Right. Just growing up with that stuff, like, a good CD edition with an Alan Clark cover, or those crazy Centipede Press books. I'd love to delve into, trying that part of the market out too. So
yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, yeah, I saw an interview where you said, Jeremy, I think it was a mainstream press publisher said to you, "We publish squares and circles, and you're giving us an octagon." And that's
the small press publishes octagons and other shapes. You know, they'll take those risks. So, all right, you guys, you were laughing at me when I couldn't hear, right? Kelly was laughing his ass off about something.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wow. It wasn't me.
I can go back to the replay later. That's all right. I don't know what happened. I guess I need new headphones. All of a sudden, couldn't hear a thing.
I don't know.
Well, thank you for taking it again, Philip.
These damn kids and their technology.
Could be a picnic error, you know. Heather said a couple things that I was thinking too, you know, about this running theme in some of your stories in Entropy in Bloom about people wanting to feel special, you know, and in the League of Zeros, this guy, his mom told him that he was special, you know, more special than other people. And the links that all these people in this version of reality are willing to go to be famous, to be loved, to have, you know, money and adulation, you know, strikes a chord with today. Not that anyone's putting their brain in a jar, but, you know, people go on these reality shows, they do all kinds of weird things just because they want to feel that way, you know. So
yeah, there was, I don't know if anybody remembers The Swan on Fox. It was a reality TV show that came out shortly after League of Zeros got published, and it was a reality show where women would come on for a beauty contest, but prior to the beauty contest, they would have radical reconstructive surgery to their entire body. And it was obviously intended to be provocative and all that, but it was just so disgusting. It lasted, you know, the one season it aired, and then obviously they had to pull it. But it was they would show the women would talk about their awful self-esteem and their body dysmorphia. Then they would get cut into pieces, reassembled, and then they would unveil their new version of themselves in front of a mirror, and they would all begin weeping. And then at the end, they made them all compete to see who was beautiful now. It was one of the ugliest things I ever saw in my whole life.
That sounds wicked.
Yeah.
That's like Running Man level.
Yeah.
It was grim, and you know, you see that now, but it's cultivated a lot slower and a lot, you know, like you can watch people shapeshift on Instagram accounts now, you know, gradually. But it's definitely still, it's got to be a massive part of our culture, whether it's, you know, physical or other things that are being articulated and emphasized beyond reality. You know, there's a lot of absurdism in behavior now just to keep generating that dopamine hit.
That's something.
Right. Exactly.
There was a comment released by a bunch of psychologists recently about kids that were trying to get themselves physically altered to look like their Snapchat filters. This was maybe a couple months ago, where they put on the Snapchat filters to look all clear. Then they beg their parents to take them to a plastic surgeon so they can be altered to look, you know, like the larger eyes and the smoother skin.
Yeah, their digital version of themselves.
Right. So
wow.
So it hasn't really left us so much as you said, it shifted. Now it's Instagram and Snapchat, not so much reality television.
Yeah. My goodness.
You also wrote one of the best lines in that story that I think I've read in a long time, where he says to his friend, you know, they're talking, and he goes, if I seem impatient, he says to him, if I seem impatient, it's only because what you're saying isn't important.
Yeah, that's me writing as a 21-year-old narcissist for sure. Like that perspective is that's how people are before they're 25, right?
That's too long ago for me to remember. But yeah. Now here's where we ask the tough questions. I keep hearing you referred to as a cult author. Are you in fact the leader of a cult?
Oh God, no. I'm so socially isolated. No, I mean, if there's any cult leaders involved in any scenes, you know, Carlton Mellick III definitely has that cult feel and appearance for Bizarro. Maybe Cody Goodfellow on the Lovecraftian scene when he does his breakfast with the modified octopus Pope hat. You know, there's different people that understand that cult vibe, but it isn't. I'm so isolated and I'm so in dad mode now. This, by the way, this is the most social interaction I've had with anyone in months outside of my family. So yeah, the cult thing isn't a prospect for me.
Well, Philip and everyone else who has asked questions did a great job. So I've just got a couple more. I read in an interview that the FBI knocked on your door
Yeah.
when you were writing SKULLCRACK City. Can you talk about that for a minute? What the hell?
Yeah. Are they with me now? It's like so
maybe.
So what happened was it was too crazy. I had been researching this section in the earliest parts of SKULLCRACK City. It's kind of a satire of techno thrillers and conspiracy thrillers, but the central character is just looped out of his mind on this psychedelic methamphetamine drug called Hex, and he's clearly beyond the pale. He's lost it. But in the course of things he's researching, one of the things he's researching is government collusion in pharmaceutical testing on civilians. And so in wanting to have some research developed for that, I fell down a deep Google rabbit hole on different kind of subject matter and found out, oh wait, that's not really a conspiracy theory. That's kind of something the US has done over and over again. And they've used American prisons for testing farms, and they brought Japanese war criminals over and gave them immunity and let them test on civilians. And there was Tuskegee. And so it was deeply disturbing. And then the next day I'm actually, I do the research, and my wife comes home from a conference, a security conference. She works in IT stuff. And she says, you need to cover up the camera on your laptop. There's too many issues. There's too many loopholes where people can see through that. And you need to shut down the silver light part of your computer. And I'm already a paranoid person. I was like, okay. And I seal off the camera. So for the first time ever, anybody looking is just seeing the back of a Post-it note. And so I keep typing, and I'm chugging Red Bulls, and I'm writing this total ode to Henry Hill and Goodfellas when he's seeing the black helicopters and he can't stop snorting cocaine kind of scene. And I have a knock on my door. And I walk out thinking, oh, it's a delivery or something. And I open it up, and there's a full, suited Dana Scully style FBI officer at my door, presenting me with the fold-out badge, massive government plates on a big black truck parked out front of my house. And one of the very first things she does is looks up and around me throughout the household. And then she starts asking me about a person of interest while she continues to look around and scope things out. And it's a person I've never heard of before that supposedly lived next door to me. Now, I've had the same next door neighbor for 5 years. So there's no way this is a person.
Right.
or she's been drastically misled. And it almost seemed like I shut off my camera, so they just dropped by to make sure I was still there and to see why. I mean, it was the deepest paranoia. There's no way me and my weird little books are that important, but for whatever accidentally happened at the FBI, for her to show up that day after me doing all that research was crazily disturbing.
Right. You don't want to feel like, oh, I'm that important, but
no. But you also don't want the FBI showing up.
Then there's that paranoid part,
Yeah. And so I posted that, and right away Brian Keene was like, "You're probably not crazy, dude." They he's like, they've dropped by to talk to me a couple times. Like they're watching a lot of different assets at any given moment. So
you know what this reminds me of, Jeremy? It reminds me of the first season of the X-Files, where the episode where Dana meets the lone gunman. Fox introduces her to the lone gunman, and they're all paranoid and everything, and blah blah blah. Later she's talking to Fox Mulder, and she said, "It's just a way for these guys to feel important, and they think the government's listening to everything they do." And then she opens up this pen, and there's a listening device in it.
You never know. So now this is actually my first time I've activated my webcam since 2015 for this Google Hangout.
Oh, the Post-it has stayed on the whole.
Yeah, it's right here. This is my security Post-it.
Thank you for taking it off for the show. I really appreciate it.
It reminds me of
redecorated, so I had to hook it up.
Steve Jackson Games back in the early 90s. They had something similar happen. They were making a cyberpunk role-playing game. And then all of a sudden the Secret Service raided them and accused them of hacking and confiscated all their stuff. Yeah, this was it. Gosh, I want to say it was like 1990, 1991. It was like, dial-up BBSs and stuff, and they were doing the same stuff back then. So it wouldn't surprise me now.
Yeah, it's funny until you go to pay taxes and you realize, like, did a penny of my taxes go to me being investigated? Like, are you kidding me? What a wasted effort. I was like, this book has a talking turtle in it. Like, you can go. This is not going to start the counterculture revolution, my friends. It has 25 dick jokes in it. Just, you can move on.
Kelly should love it then, yeah.
Chapter 5
Big
is
fan
not
of the dick jokes.
Chapter 5 is not how to make a homemade bomb.
Yeah. Well, just a couple more questions. God,
I can smell Kelly's scotch from here.
I know, right?
I really.
Yeah, the formaldehyde is like burning through my speakers.
Pete's out of bed.
I got my nap in. Now I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys made me forget my question. Now here it is. Who are you reading right now, or what are you reading right now? What have you read lately?
The one I have sitting on my end table right now is Stephen Graham Jones' Mapping the Interior, which I've been told is one of those books that everybody has to read this year, but it will also make you cry. So it's one of those things where I look at it all the time. I get to the end of my night, and I'm like, God, I would love to read that right now. I love Jones's work. Am I in the mood to like let a book turn me into a weepy mess? Because I know he's effective at like especially familial stuff. One of my favorite short stories of all time is like about a father protecting a son out in a winter storm.
Father, Son, and the Holy Rabbit.
Yeah, and that one destroyed me. I mean, that's when I realized Jones was going to be one of my favorite writers of the next 10 years. When I read that in Cemetery Dance. So so that's the one I'm currently staring at, and then. Actually, I'm going back through Disappearance at Devil's Rock and getting ready to go into Cabin at the End of the World. And I'm doing all the Tremblays except for the crime stuff for an event that he and I have coming up that I'm almost able to talk about. So something we'll be doing together later. So I'm getting a master's in Paul Tremblay dad horror right now, looking at all his themes and chugging through his books, which are just they're especially a Head Full of Ghosts. If you kind of know what's coming towards the end, it's one of those that's actually more rewarding the second time.
Yeah.
Because you see he really did weave everything in. It wasn't a cheat at the end. So so I've been getting my Tremblay on and then staring apprehensively at a Jones book lately.
Well, I like to ask every writer this because it's fascinating the different answers that I get. And the question is this: what do you consider success as a writer to be personally?
Oh man, that's a tough call. I mean, because even success in a writing career isn't necessarily what would qualify as an economic success compared to, say, being a middle management banker. Maybe it was in the 80s, but based on the current model, I mean, the success, especially after I've been at this for 18 years, it has to be an artistic one. That can be the only true gauge, is like a sense of artistic growth, a sense of vague satisfaction with the work, or and then also that sense of truly reaching the right readers, finding those folks who appreciate what you do, who experience empathy or even just vicarious thrills through what you're creating. I think that's the biggest success you can have with creating a work of art, is having other people feel it. So yeah, I mean that would be the onus for me. In the River is my most critically acclaimed book, but so far it also doesn't have the kind of, nobody's saying the words fun and thrilling about it, because it's not. It's a immensely difficult and challenging read that deals with a lot of taboos and a lot of grief. And so to me, everything after I wrote that is gravy, though, because it's a book I can look at and I feel proud of for the first time. It's like the first time where I'm like, how did I accidentally write that? I'm genuinely proud of that work. I don't have false humility about that work. I actually like it, which is unique to the whole of my canon. So I'd say just like managing to work hard enough to make one good piece of art and having anything you make reach people. That's the definition to me.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and it's largely how I feel as well. About an artist or running a podcast or writing a book, if people are touched by what you do and you're making them feel something, or you're making them their lives better in some small way, or whatever, that's a great feeling, really is.
Yeah.
So, and if you can get paid millions on top of it, that's always good.
Those are the lucky ones,
right?
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have a question for Jeremy before we let him go? Or did we harass him enough?
I would just like to ask before, in addition to the novel Exit Human, and is there anything else on the horizon that you can quick pimp that that might be hitting in anthologies or collection, or anything coming out that we can keep an eye out for?
No, I mean, I kind of juiced my brain a little bit there towards the between 2015 getting Skullcrack, Entropy in Bloom, well, The Sleep of Judges being new there, In the River, and then knocking out Exit Human, which is my biggest novel to date. I kind of exploited all my most recent fears and traumatic events, and so I'm just waiting for the next awful thing to happen.
Right.
That'll be the generate the next book. So yeah, I'm taking a break, fixing up the family house, learning how to do renovations, taking electric shocks, which is teaching me some things, and yeah, so I'm kind of in a holding pattern until the next book lands in my head. But I also don't want to saturate the market. I used to take 5 years between books, so doing 4 in a 5-year stretch is a pretty big deal for me. Someday I want to get to like Lansdale level prolific, but I think that takes a lot of work and discipline. So that's a tough road to hoe someday.
Important point, Philip. Is quick pimp a real word?
It's actually one word, quick pimp.
Is there a dash between the quick?
Nope.
And,
no
dash.
It's just one word.
I've got a pencil here. I just need to write that.
to quick pimp. I was quick pimped.
You were quick pimped.
Later I will be quick pimped.
All right, Jeremy. We got a lot of things to talk about in the second hour here, and Kelly and Ben and Philip and I are going to, and I think Rick might join in, going to battle over Castle Rock. This is like Batman v Superman level battles, or Captain America Civil War battles.
Let's be clear here. The Batman side are the ones that like Castle Rock. Just saying.
You're really wrong about that. But anyway,
I'm totally fine with that.
You are more than welcome to stay and argue with us, or you're more than welcome to leave at this point. Whatever you want to do is fine.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll hang on.
All right. All right. So first of all, let's talk about Castle Rock as a series without spoilers. I mean, is it successful? We will talk spoilers on episode 7, and I'll warn people. But is this show successful so far?
I would say so. I mean, it is definitely a slow-moving show, and it's got ups and downs for what had been good episodes. But I think that they're setting out to do something, and I think they're doing it.
Well, I think it's been picked up for season 2, so I think that would make it successful.
Yeah.
I think they're also trying to be self-contained. So if you haven't read all these Stephen King books, you can still enjoy the plot.
There's a review at the New York Times that I think really sums this up, man. Tell me if you guys agree or disagree. But he starts off where he says, a few weeks ago, I finally saw Avengers Infinity War. I liked it fine. I did not love it, though, anything like the guy 2 seats over from me who howled and clapped and over, pointed out to his date the callback to the comics and approximately 5,000 other Marvel movies that converged into this one. You could argue that really we weren't even watching the same film. For me, a very casual Marvel fan, Infinity War was a decent bad guy assembling a doomsday weapon showdown story. But for my neighbor, it was as if Thanos had twiddled the perception-altering reality stone on his Armageddon gauntlet. We were watching Infinity War in the same space, but entirely different planes. And he compares that to Castle Rock. That if you're this huge, huge Stephen King fan, you're going to enjoy all these references in Castle Rock. But if you're a casual Stephen King fan that, you don't get all the references, you're going to go, the story's going nowhere. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, I would start off saying, while there are references, they're mostly to Shawshank Redemption. The references to the greater Stephen King world have been pretty
Pangborn.
well, right,
Yeah.
Pangborn. But then if you look at actual how Pangborn was used in the Dark Half, in Needful Things, is it the same Pangborn? They never seem to even reference those stories. They've referenced Cujo a couple of times, The Shining, and several Shawshank Redemption little cameos.
And they're planted. They're so off the. They sort of have nothing to do with the story, which is something I'll get into. But I would actually say the opposite. I would say if you're a Stephen King fan and you're watching this show, you're probably disappointed more so than someone who is casually watching it. Because I think if this show was called Piccadilly Square and the name of the prison was, Miss Mopey Bope's Home for Wayward Girls, it'd be nothing would change. You'd have the exact same plot, the exact same story points. It's J.J. Abrams doing what he always does. He takes a mediocre product and he puts a big brand on it and he sells it to the public as something that it's not, so that he can get butts and seats and eyeballs to the screen. He did the same thing with Cloverfield.
Stephen King, if this was just some series on Hulu with the exact same, I'll use the word plot loosely, I don't think many people would be interested. Right? Kelly?
Well, I disagree. You know that I didn't love the first 3 episodes. Episode 4, I thought it picked up quite a bit, and I kind of re-examined the whole thing, and I re-examined what I like about Stephen King, and I think it's interesting that we all like the same thing about Stephen King, but when somebody actually does it in a different medium like television, we're all complaining, where's the action? The strength of Stephen King is the character development. It's the only reason we care about the horror is because it's happening to people that we have come to know and like. I've come to really love Scott Glenn's Pangborn. Sissy Spacek is spectacular, and with this new episode, I really, really felt like we got some insight into her character. So it's been a lot of character building.
Do we need character building for 7 out of 10 episodes?
I would say you need 10 out of 10 episodes of character building.
And then the action happens in the last 5 minutes.
No, but there has been action going on throughout. I get that it's not what you guys wanted out of a Stephen King thing, but what did you want? Did you want a clown? Did you want a dog? Did you want a haunted car?
We did have a massacre in the prison.
Right. And stuff is happening. It's a eerie story. It's a creepy story. It might not be balls out horror, but I do think that it's being done well.
And here's the point I would want to make with this show. It's not. I don't mind shows that are paced. I don't mind shows that are way into character development. I've actually given it some thought after Kelly and I discussed it the other night. I was like, what is it about this? I was trying to put my finger on what it was about the show that was bothering me. And I think what is bothering me about the show is that it doesn't have an overarching question that needs to be answered. There's no target that the plot is going toward. For example, if you take Twin Peaks, who killed, what's her face? It was the tagline. It's the tagline of the entire series. In the Sinner, it's why did she murder this guy on the beach? In Succession, it's will the son and the dad who will take over the empire. There's always something that you're going toward, so that when you have these unique episodes that are very slow paced and developing characters, there's an overarching design that viewers are interested in following and finding how they're going to get from A to B. But in this show, there's no big question. There's no end. There's no target to look at. It's just these guys kind of meandering about and different action. And none of the action is cohesive. It's random.
Who is the kid and why is he in Shawshank? And where has the young man been? Ben?
Henry?
Henry?
Henry.
Where was he?
Henry or Matthew? I get the following.
Yeah, but take those questions. In order to care about who the kid is, you have to, like, in other words, they're doing it sort of backwards. They're showing you the kid and they're revealing him in slowly very slowly over the course of 7 episodes so far, and you're supposed to care where he comes from. I don't care I don't care if he's the devil.
Yeah,
I don't care if he's the Antichrist. I don't care if he's Jesus, coming from the. I don't care. There's no, in other words, there's no action which needs to be resolved. It's just we're building, but there's no like thing that happened. There's no that impetus for the plot to follow. It's just kind of loose leaves. And I mentioned that the other day we were talking about it on Facebook. I was like, it's like watching water go down a drain. It's just, there's no end game for me. And I think that's art is very subjective, and I don't want to disparage the show because it is very well done and it's incredibly well acted and it's nicely shot and all that stuff. I just wish that there was more propulsion to the story. I wish that I wanted to tune in every week to find out what happened next, but instead of just watching an enjoyable hour of TV. And as far as the questions are concerned, besides the kid, they're also botching the plot. They're botching the action. Like it's all very lateral. In other words, okay, so take the kid. The second episode, he's like investigating where he was while he was disappeared, and he's investigating, the cabin and the weird cabin and the weird brother who said, well, I had the box of your personal belongings. And all of a sudden it was this big reveal. And I was like, oh, cool. They're going to develop this plot point of where the kid was during the 10 days. And then they dropped it. You've not heard mention of what happened to the kid for since that second episode. So it's like they built this
question that they're not addressing.
Yeah, they built it up and they were started to talk about it and then they left it. And they keep doing that. They keep starting to talk about things, they leave it. The most interesting part of the entire series for me to date was when Alan Pangborn and the kid were in the forest, and he was and they were talking about when he left him in the trunk. They were kind of in that flashback scene, and he was like, he goes, you realize that they knew each other, and he was like, I know who you are, and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, great, they're finally going to reveal something that I can latch on to, so that I'm interested in this show. And then it went away, and they just keep doing that, and it just seems very discombobulated, and it just seems very meandering. And it doesn't seem like there's any propulsion at all to the story.
Well, but I kind of feel we found out who the kid was. We all agree on that?
Well, I think we should wait for that until we get into spoilers, right, Mike?
Right. But I think we have a pretty good idea of who he's supposed to be.
Okay, the last thing I'll say before we go into spoiler territory for 5 minutes, something like that. You mentioned not caring about the characters, Philip. I don't care about any of the characters except for Pangborn and Sissy SpaceX character.
Sissy SpaceX?
Yeah, whatever.
Sissy
SpaceX.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Isn't that an Elon Musk thing, SpaceX?
Those are the two characters I care about, though. I don't care about Henry. I don't know what the hell his son's doing there.
Why do you hate black people so much, Mike? Jesus.
Henry's we'll talk about Henry. We were talking about the Reverend, right?
That's the Oxycontin talking.
Yeah.
There's a reason why you wouldn't care about Henry.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't care about anyone on the show except for those two characters.
When I'm this hungover, I don't care about anything or anyone.
Can we get into spoilers?
I
can explain why you don't care about Henry.
I cared about him at the beginning. I cared about where he was during those 10 days. And then, like Philip said, they dropped it.
They stopped talking about it.
I'm pissed. I'm to the point where they're frustrating me. I don't even care anymore.
Okay, I get Henry confused with Matthew because I forgot that Henry had a son.
Okay. All right. What do you think it'll take? It takes about 5 minutes to discuss spoilers in episode 7 or so.
No, I mean, I think one of the things is there's a lot of it's not a perfect show. I don't think any of us are arguing it's the best thing on television or the internet or whatever, but it has some of the problems a lot of modern shows do, where it's got 10 different plots going on at once, right? You have the neighbor with her psychic powers, you have the mom with dementia, you have Pangborn with just being kind of old and grumpy, you have the kid, you've got Deaver, who's really being built as sort of the main character, trying to figure out his background while trying to help the kid. And so you get things like in episode 6, they were very focused on Henry Deaver. And then the last episode is very focused on his mom. And that, I understand that leads to kind of disappointment or kind of this thought of like, oh, well, it's moving slow. It's not developing anything. But I would honestly say in the last 3 or 4 episodes, there's actually been a significant amount of plot development. Is there like a gigantic overall major plot? Well, I mean, J.J. Abrams isn't known for kind of like doing that, right? What was the plot of Lost, right? Did we ever learn a plot of Lost?
I don't think anyone's going to argue that Lost was a great show. They had no idea where they were going from the beginning.
I'll argue it. I fucking loved Lost.
I love Lost, but it ended very it left a lot of unresolved questions. I feel
right, and we know that from the pilot, he didn't actually have any answers to these questions he was asking. They were just putting something together, and so this show does have some of those flaws. But I wouldn't say that they like. I've actually cared about all of the characters. They're all the main ones. What's going on with Henry Deaver? I think I've got my own theories, and I'm really enjoying kind of his development and kind of his discovery as we follow it. I guess we can discuss it more in the spoilers, but that latest episode, even if I just seen that independent of everything else, I think it would have been great.
Okay, so before we beat this topic to death, let's take 5 minutes to discuss with spoilers. So if you've not seen the show, tune us out for 5 minutes. I'm watching the clock, and then we'll come back and talk about something else. So 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Episode 7, Kelly.
Well, first of all, I just thought it was a tour de force. If SpaceX doesn't get the Emmy for this, it's a crime. She's falling into. I
can't argue with that at all.
She's falling into the type of characters that King's writes in his later years, like the guy from Insomnia, from Doomickey. These people who something extraordinary is happening, and they cannot be trusted because they aren't, they don't have all their faculties. So. We saw in episode 7 that, for lack of a better word, she's a time walker, and we're seeing the way that she sees everything in the episodes that have happened. So we're getting these flashbacks through her perspective, and I don't know what's real or what's not. I'm not saying that she is absolutely a time walker, but it is interesting that she would pop in and out of a flashback, and the her in that flashback would see her and make note, make eye contact and a nod or something like that. I think that we're seeing that she may be the linchpin and the only thing that can defeat the evil that has come to the town. And I think that the evil that has come to the town, Rick, are we on the same page? Is the kid her husband?
Yeah, that's what I feel.
I would say so too. And so that does come as a bit of a shock because he's been barely mentioned through the episodes, but it feels like, with the revelations in episode 7 that we're finding out that he is the big bad.
Wait a minute. The kid who plays the Pennywise, I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
Skarsgård. He's her husband?
It certainly feels like it.
How does that work?
Illuminated by that other dimension of that's a nexus of sound.
Polly killed her husband,
but his body went. Just remember his body exploded when they opened up when they opened up his remains. They couldn't find his body.
Oh, the pastor. Oh, the pastor's body exploded. That's right. It was all goopy.
And we don't know when that happened. So it could have happened when the kid first appeared and got caught by the warden.
Right.
Well, and they tie that in with so in episode 6, when Deaver was talking to the really strange people in the woods, they kind of bring up like, oh, your father knew about this and the voice of God and all this stuff. And then the mom mentions that she sees the kid in the suit, and she's like, oh, I thought we buried him. I'm sure we buried him in that suit. And then when he comes into the house, when she's picking up the pills on the floor, there's kind of an implication that he's kind of is standing in for her husband. I don't know that it's absolutely certain that he's the same or if he's just sort of like filling that space, but I would agree that they're definitely implying it. That's for sure.
Or it
Yeah,
may be
I
like
mean,
it may be like Bag of Bones. Some cosmic force may have merged with her husband.
right. He seems to know things that only she and the husband know, and stuff that she doesn't know. He knows the combination to the safe upstairs.
Also, Pag, when Pag 1 was asked by the kid, "Why didn't you get me out of the trunk?" and he said, "Because I wanted revenge."
Right.
He recognized the kid as the Reverend, and he hated him for the way he treated Sissy Spacek.
Ruth, yeah.
Ruth.
Philip, would you agree with me that it was obvious that she was going to shoot Pangborn from the beginning of episode 7?
Yeah, that was
is that
one
a
of the
big deal? Was it obvious that Luke Skywalker was going to blow up the Death Star? Of course it was. This was not meant to be a surprise.
Wait, what happened? Luke Skywalker did what?
Oh, that's a spoiler. Okay, great.
Oh, Jesus, I haven't seen that movie,
Star
Kelly.
Wars. Now it's been ruined for you by Kelly.
By the way, did anybody like the interesting twist on the psycho shower scene they did in that episode?
Oh, that
You mean
was nice.
when she was bathing with her kid?
No, when she was hiding in the
So
shower
weird.
with a knife to knife her the guy who was threatening her. It was sort of
a reverse
Bates
psycho.
reverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did think that the scene where she was bathing and the kid was watching her was one of the creepiest scenes of the entire season. So points for that.
She had a shower curtain.
I was terrified. I was terrified.
All right, we are at the end of 5 minutes. Is there anything else that we absolutely have to say?
Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
God damn it.
Vader actually means father in German.
There's this one question I have, which just goes to the continuity of the show. You mentioned a character called Polly Kelly, I think.
Mm-hmm. Polly was.
It's been a while since I've read Needful Things. Did Peg won't have a love interest besides his late wife?
Polly Chambers.
Polly Chambers is the female lead in Needful Things and is supposedly the love of his life.
Okay.
She's also John McCain's wife.
That's true.
So she gets around.
And to be clear, in the books, Pangborn leaves Castle Rock after that and gets married to Polly Chambers and is living off in southern Maine somewhere with her.
So they are obviously ignoring that for this series. And
there's some talk of parallel worlds, so it's obviously the parallel Stephen King world.
Not a universe.
Yeah, this is not canon.
Okay.
I kind of hope a giant turtle appears at the last episode.
Who among you loves the fact that now when you're binge watching a show on Netflix, you get Netflix commercials in between episodes? Isn't that like the greatest idea ever?
I didn't notice that yet.
I haven't seen.
You haven't been watching Netflix then?
I don't do that.
But aren't they doing that where the credits are rolling? So I mean, it's like when you're watching on regular television, you see like the credits in the corner, and you get the commercial.
You're supposed to be able to go right to the next episode.
Well, see, I hate that and we talked about this, because I hate that it goes in the next episode, because you 1 second you're sitting back on the couch all relaxed and mellow, and the next second you're like diving for the remote control to turn it off before the next episode starts. It's very stressful.
I
told you can turn that off, Philip.
I love that it does that.
I don't know how to turn it off.
Netflix is pissing off a lot of people with the commercials thing, but evidently not you guys. So,
and I only have 3 billion subscribers.
I'm just mad at commercials interrupting the action on Hulu. I know I think you can pay more to get rid of that, but that's what I miss from Netflix.
I don't like that Facebook is running ads during videos. That's very upsetting. One second you're watching a cat knock shit off a counter. The next second you're watching like a drug commercial.
Well, here you go. Just look, there's a cat right there. There's no commercials in this entire show.
You should be charging for that.
I know that cat is not supposed to be up.
That cat looks like it's going to cut you.
Since we're on this subject, I hate it on YouTube that you now get this rectangular ad, which has a button to close it, but the button is next to something which expands it, and it's impossible to close. To close it with 100% accuracy, but after the time you're hitting the wrong button.
By God, if I was president.
Next week on Grumpy Old Men.
All right.
And then you guys
talk
wonder why
about-
the FBI is listening.
We talk about sprinklers.
Okay, if you
Why
guys
they-
want
Get out of my yard!
I think I could tolerate all this if we had a different president.
Well, that's Jeremy's
Here we
fault.
go.
We already established that earlier.
That's true. All right, article on IO9. It's official. A full season of Watchmen is coming to HBO in 2019.
Snore.
What do we think of that? I mean, what are they going to do? This? What are they going to do? The story? Are they going to do after Watchmen? What are they going to do?
I don't know. I don't.
I heard it was new characters after Watchmen, or at least characters who were not focused in Watchmen.
If Dr. Manhattan's not in there, I am just not interested.
They may be dealing with the aftermath of the publication of that story that ended up in the newspaper at the end of the graphic novel.
I mean, do we need more superhero shows? Is it necessary?
Evidently.
I don't know, Philip. Do we need more talking puppy movies, for Christ's sakes? I just found out that you were also responsible for some of those other ones.
Yeah.
Well, I gave up on I had too many superhero shows. I gave up on DC just sticking them all just because there's too many of them.
Well, the Flash sucks now, so.
I've tried to watch Black Lightning and I just can't do it.
I tried to. What?
Well, Marvel has had two misfires, the Inhumans. Iron Fist, I think, will be better in the second season. But the Inhumans was a real disappointment.
I've heard
Otherwise,
The Innocence is good. I haven't seen it. I think she has some sort of power.
The Innocence? I was going to bring that up. On
Doesn't she have a power or something? Or but it's like really super.
Other people or something. I saw the trailer and I couldn't decide if I liked it or not. And then my mom was watching it today and she really liked it. So I dare any of you to contradict my mother.
Is that a film or a series or a limited series?
It's a series.
Okay.
Yeah. Ashes and Entropy it's a Kickstarter it's a collection with Laird Barron, Matthew Bartlett, Damian Angelica Walters, Nadia Bolkin, and a bunch of other people. And it's got 4 days left, $15,000 goal. And right now, as I speak, they're at 10,272. So if you want to see another anthology with Laird Barron and company in it, then Google Ashes and Entropy Kickstarter and go for it. Kelly, what did you think of that trailer for Skeletons in the Closet? It seems like your kind of thing.
I didn't get a chance to watch it. I'm sorry.
Oh.
No.
You're never ready. You're never ready for the shows.
Had one thing to do.
You're embarrassing me again.
You know what, though? I did watch that you brought up last week, or
Summer of '84.
Yeah. I didn't love it.
You didn't? I haven't seen it. So
it's well done and it's well acted, but it's a story we've seen a million times before. You know, maybe a serial killer is next door and these kids are kind of snooping around and trying to find out. There's a nice little twist in the third act, but I kind of felt like the writers said, well, what if we had taken this story that everyone has seen a million times before and we made it end this way instead? Which is kind of a neat idea, except that, you know, the first two acts then are just everything we've seen before. And it's tough to compare, or not compare, it's easy to compare. It's tough to say that this does anything different than stuff we're seeing in Stranger Things or It now, where everything is brought up to the 80s so well. This one was, you know, just another movie set in the 80s now with a bunch of kids on bikes and, you know, to what end, I ask.
And why can't the 90s get any play? There was a lot of dumb reference points we could use from the 90s.
Fuck the 90s, Jeremy. Jesus Christ, you stayed quiet through the entire Castle Rock thing and you had to bring up the 90s?
Let's get some 90s.
Remember, You got to
Let's bring back the 90s, the ugliest era in the history of all the arts.
I'm going to set my next book in 1994.
Jeremy?
What's that?
Did you grow up in the 90s?
I may have, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was going to point out to Kelly that he is not quite as aged as you are, and maybe he's nostalgic about the 90s like you're.
Oh, no, I hated the 90s.
I was going to say everybody who lived in the 90s hates it.
I got married in 96, so I've got some nostalgia about the 90s. So, anyway, have you guys seen Incident in a Ghostland?
No.
Okay, what is wrong with all of you?
Is it that good?
I loved it. It's really good.
Movie, Mike?
Incident in a Ghostland.
Wait, but it's a movie? Sorry?
It is a movie, yes.
I see.
Motion picture film.
He did have a movie night. Unfortunately, I'm getting to a point where I can't stay up beyond 10 o'clock these days. So
you missed nothing. Rabbit was really glitchy last night when I tried to show it. So, yeah. But anybody listening, if you've not seen Incident in Ghostland, it's one of the, in my opinion, and obviously everything's subjective, but one of the best horror movies I've seen this year.
What?
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ringing endorsement.
And there's some stuff in there that's hard for me personally to take, and will probably be hard for some people to take, but I don't think it's exploitative. I think it's done just right. So,
what platform is it available on, Mike?
It's on Amazon. You can rent it on Amazon.
Unless you're Heather, you can get it for free. So.
Right.
Unless you're Kelly and you illegally download it, you know.
Right. Steal money from children.com.
Yeah.
Deathtoartists.com.
Let's see here. What else do we have to talk about? Oh yeah, some guy I know. I wrote a book called Shiloh. I don't know. I didn't read it.
Not a great movie.
Not a great movie.
Great movie.
1 star. Not a good movie. My favorite Amazon review of all time.
Best review ever.
Best review ever. I shared it with Victor Laval the other day, and he was cracking up. I was like,
anyway, you're doing a giveaway on your website. P for Cross. I can't even say all this. Can they go to pfracassi.com and look for the giveaway?
Yes, it's actually on the homepage of my website, which is
okay. What do they get? How does this work?
Well, I have a little newsletter, and the idea is that if you sign up for my newsletter, I try and give stuff away every once a month. And I was going to give away a copy of Shiloh, and then I decided, just for fun, that I would write a short story in the back of the book.
Of each one? How many giveaways are you doing?
No,
I want that.
Just this one. So if you enter the giveaway, and hopefully you have the option of joining my newsletter, which I would appreciate, then you can win this copy of one-of-a-kind copy of Shiloh with an original story handwritten in the back.
Now, you remember I told you that writing over and over, all work and no play makes Philip Fracassi a dull boy does not count as a story.
I disagree.
Does for NaNoWriMo, man.
As long as you're selling copies of Shiloh, I don't give a damn.
I just wrote, you can also buy Shiloh. I just wrote, like, and I went to the thing, yada, 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 something.
Insert 25 dick jokes?
It's just right. It's just
sorry,
a bunch
Heather,
of
what?
Just a bunch of puns.
I'm sorry, Heather. What did you say? I spoke over you.
Oh, pardon me. I was asking if he inserted 25 dick jokes, but then I was proud of myself because I used the word insert in conjunction with dick jokes.
That's
happier.
Oh, you're gonna
wait a second. Yeah. Let me write that in right now.
Let me insert that right now.
Number 26.
Did this story
insert
start with
dick joke here?
Yeah. Did this story start with Dear Diary? By the way,
it's just like me talking about how depressed I am.
Yeah.
For a couple pages.
And how much you hate your public.
I've had a really bad day today. buy Shiloh, and we also, since we're on the subject of talking about me, is we also have a reissue of
But when are we not?
well, too few and far between, IMO. But we also have a reissue of Behold the Void on the horizon.
Yes, we do, with illustrations for each story.
And a cover art by Heather Landry.
It's going to be, I don't want to overhype this, but it's going to be the most special book of all time. So
it's going to be Jeremy Robert Johnson special, like that level,
right,
of special.
Right. Okay.
The book's so good, you'll want to buy it twice.
Well, they can buy it twice. They can buy the print and then the Kindle.
Yeah, and the reissue will have story notes in it for each story, which was not in the original edition, as well as the illustrations.
That is true. That's pretty neat. And aren't you putting an extra story in there?
No, we didn't. We decided not to do that.
Decide against that. Okay. Yeah. There's a Who Goes There, The Thing tabletop game. Returns to tabletop. This is I clicked the wrong link. God damn it. Whoever's in charge of this is...
It's a Thing tabletop game?
Yeah, The Thing tabletop game.
That's interesting.
Aren't there two?
Yeah, there's a couple already.
Yeah.
Outpost 31. Is it?
Yep.
Another one? Yeah.
Ours Cardboard. Oh, no, okay, yeah, that's not the publisher.
I think one already was issued.
Publisher, Certifiable Studios.
I think there already was a Kickstarter for one.
Oh, was it? Okay. Jesus Christ, it's $75. Looks like you can get it on Amazon. But anyway, so I posted about this on the Lovecraft Easing Facebook page, which has a few people on it. And one of the comments was from a guy named Eddie Brock. And he says, I really agree with this too. The movie is best, talking about Childs and what was the other guy's name at the end?
McCready.
McCready and Childs?
McCready.
You remember at the end where they're sitting there staring at each other? Of course you do.
Yeah.
The movie's best if the thing is neither of them. The ending where they just stare at each other, both paranoid, best reflects the major themes of the movie. What do you guys think?
Well, it's already been decided that it was Childs was the thing.
No, it
has.
Yeah, I think it's because his
right.
It's his eyes. Yes, there's an optic trick.
I thought it was because he was supposedly not breathing.
And no, his breath doesn't crystallize.
What did Carpenter have to say about it?
He gave some coy response, but he didn't. He didn't.
Probably said, "Get off my lawn."
Not been decided then, has it? No.
Well, court of public opinion has spoken.
The eye thing, I think, is pretty good evidence because I didn't notice this. I listened to some video on YouTube and somebody said every time you see everybody who was a thing had this little trick they did was the eyes, and they do it with Childs at the end. So at least it was originally decided that they should be. Maybe he's decided to leave it ambiguous for whatever reasons, and maybe he's going to revise it or whatever. But Carpenter's original intent was certainly that Childs was a
man. I would love to see a sequel with Kurt Russell.
I will tell you that I did really enjoy the Dark Horse comic series that were done after the film. I think there are. I think
I need to read that. I didn't know that.
There are. I think there's
He even hold out on us.
The three. I think there's 3 4-issue miniseries. I'd have to go back and check, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
There, and I think just like I think Dark Horse did really good work with Aliens. I think they did really good work with Predator, and I think they did really good work with The Thing, and Terminator as well.
Probably a lot of that's going to be lost.
Yeah.
Pete.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of you, by the way. Not hungover or on dope.
Wow.
Unlike
So he says
on this podcast.
It doesn't take much,
Chill off.
I am, eating magic mushrooms, but hey.
I've been thinking about pizza for the last hour and a half. I just can't seem to get it out of my head.
You know, I will tell you that Friday night I made yellow Spanish rice with grilled dolphin, and I fed my whole family, and they gobbled it all up. And 3 minutes later, after I cleaned all the dishes, they were like, "Can we order a pizza?"
Unbelievable.
And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!"
I'm still stuck on your eating dolphins.
Yeah, I know.
Well, this
Talk
was
about
not
bearing
a
the
flipper
lead.
dolphin, right? This was a mahi dolphin.
This is mahi
No,
dorado.
it was a full-size dolphin right there on the table.
Yeah.
It was not a bottlenose.
Not a bottlenose.
Okay. Well,
Starkist.
getting back to the thing, I like the idea that neither one of them are the thing.
That dramatically, that's a better ending. I'll agree with that. But I think the evidence contradicts it.
Did any of you guys see the thing that the prequel that came out about 5 years ago? I talked about this. I talked about this before, but I enjoyed that movie. I thought it was really well done. The only thing about the movie that sucked was the special effects at the very end of the film ruined the entire rest of the movie. Somebody was doing the wrong kind of dope that day, and
there is a right kind.
Cannonballed the film. But I other than the spaceship special effects, I really enjoyed that movie. I thought it was really well done.
I thought they did a good job of mirroring the scenes from, or I guess setting up the scenes that were in the original. Like when in the original they visit that base, and I thought they did a great job of kind of matching the damage, I guess, that was caused.
Yeah, and they did like this. They did the Force Awakens or not Force Awakens thing. They did the Princess Leia thing, where they tied in, they meshed the movies together at the end. So it was really, and that was, to your point, that was really well done, how they really matched it perfectly with the new stuff and the old stuff.
Princess Leia thing?
Yeah, Princess Leia at the end of Rogue One.
How Rogue One tied into Star Wars, because Princess Leia, but her face was like a computerized version of her.
Oh, okay, right. I didn't watch Rogue One.
So the thing prequel kind of ends at the opening of the original movie, basically.
Oh, okay.
You watch Rogue One, Mike? That's a great movie.
I tried to watch Rogue One, just like I tried to watch The Last Jedi.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Last Jedi. What a load.
That just killed the podcast. You mentioned Last Jedi, everyone goes silent, starts crying.
No, there are a few of us here that like The Last Jedi.
I'm not willing to get into it.
Yeah, I like alligator people too, but
Pete, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can you explain the Grendel mask on the sarcophagus behind you?
It's just a Grendel mask.
Are you Grendel?
I could be.
Great explanation.
Is that Grendel the comic book character?
Yeah, I have 3 Grendel masks, and that's the one that's out. So,
how do you get one of those?
I bought that probably 25 years ago.
That's damn cool.
I thought it was Venom.
No. I thought it was Venom too.
No,
it looks. The nose is what makes it different. But if you're not.
Who
is Grendel? I don't know who Grendel is.
It's a comic book created by Matt Wagner. It's
I know the John Gardner Grendel sorry.
No, he was created, I want to say, in the early 80s. It was like Matt Wagner's first work in comics. He wanted to do like a reverse of Batman, was his original idea.
Yeah.
So have a brilliant, well-funded criminal.
Right.
It went completely different directions, but that's how it started.
Yeah. Actually, I have the complete Grendel collection. So
yeah, I have an issue of Comico Primer #2. I got him to sign it and everything. Grendel's great.
How long did it run for?
It's still running.
Sort of. Running. I mean, it's always just been miniseries and kind of one shots here and there.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to mention a couple of books besides A Long Dark Grim Road. Lost Films. That's a really interesting concept to me, and I somehow missed out on Lost Signals. This is Max Booth III edited it, I think, and
Perpetual Motion. Perpetual Motion Publishing is the name.
Okay, yeah, Perpetual Motion. Lost Signals.
Motion Machine, I think.
And I've got both books coming to me, and Lost Films is just now out. Check those out. I think the premise is really interesting. The other thing I want to mention is that I only found out today is that John Padgett has a limited edition book coming up called The Broker of Nightmares.
I think that's out.
Web store.
It's a chat book.
Yes, it's out now. I'm sorry. I guess Google The Broker of Nightmares, John Padgett, Nightscape Press, and you should come to it. But I mean, John Padgett's a hell of a writer, so this should.
Yeah.
All right, we have anything else to talk about?
Kelly, Strange Eons.
You
said you'd answer my questions on here.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
We got Strange Eons questions.
He wants to know when this next issue is going to be published.
Hey, guess what? The pre-order just went live during the podcast, so issue 23 is available to order right now.
Wow,
it's got a really, really cool cover by Nick Gucker.
That was one of my other questions. How do I get that as a poster? Because that was awesome.
You can get that as a poster from Nick Gucker. He sells that print. So I'm not sure if he's got it on his site.
It's like an Etsy store, right? Is that what
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So strange-aeons.com, and Aeons is AEONS.
Yeah, and we've got fiction from John C. Foster, Alan Baxter, Brian Evison, and Clay McLeod Chapman, which doesn't really run in our circles, but he is the guy, if you have ever seen the little short film called Late Bloomer, which is about a kid in school and his teacher is he's the guy who wrote that story, and he writes some really cool kind of gothic horror, and he's also graduated to writing a little rag called Spider-Man. So
okay,
I've got some.
Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
And something to plug.
Yes.
The Secret Origins of Weird Tales by John Locke. Excellent scholarly work. Discusses Weird Tales beginnings in 1923 and 1924. Among two of the topics covered are the whole Houdini ghostwriting by Lovecraft and the Love Dead controversy, the story Lovecraft revised for CNET. Both superbly discussed.
Okay. Well, I guess before we go, Heather, you have a quick question for us comic book guys.
Yeah, I was just wondering if anybody was into Rick Geary. I just discovered him yesterday.
You just discovered Rick Geary?
I know. I'm sorry.
Jeez.
I read like 12 of his books in like one day. So
wow, she didn't ask for judgment. She needs information.
Yes, Rick Geary is cool.
Well, if you want to make a judgment, I don't know who Rick Geary is, so you can.
I don't either. So.
Well, the stuff that I found by him was these really amazing, intricate, wonderfully drawn true crime, Victorian crime type things about, H.H. Holmes, The Beast of Chicago, the Bloody Bender family, the Lizzie Borden, the Lindbergh baby, the Black Dahlia murder, stuff like that. And they're all like painstakingly researched, and they're just so intricately drawn. They're just gorgeous and fascinating.
He used to do a strip in, what was it, Kelly? Epic or Heavy Metal? I think it was Epic.
He's apparently done heavy metal as well, and he's in like stuff like Creepy and Eerie, which I haven't read that yet, but I'm sure that's cool too.
Yeah, I'm trying to place the stuff that he did in heavy metal. What was the strip? Was it an ongoing strip?
I'm not sure. I just, was all nosy and read his biography and stuff, but.
I know the name, but I can't place it.
Yeah, just a wonderful artist and writer. He did I think he did a really great adaptation of Wuthering Heights, I think. And he's in Graphic Classics Volume 4, the H.P. Lovecraft issue.
I found something called The Cat in the Window that was apparently in heavy metal. So I haven't read that one yet.
All right. Well, next week we got Tim Wagner. If you simply cannot get enough of Kelly Young, then
Jesus.
Wow. Dead Again podcast.
I was just thinking, how can I get more Kelly Young in my life?
Insert dick.
That's why I'm bringing this up.
Insert dick here.
It's deadagainpodcast.com, right?
It is deadagainpodcast.com. Yeah, and it's a little more, I was going to say irreverent than this one. I guess I can't say that. It's right around the same
I thought you were
humor
going to say
level.
more professional.
No.
I see that Jeremy has a Jaws poster behind him. Didn't you say you just discussed Jaws?
Yeah, Jaws is my favorite movie, Jeremy.
It's up there for me too. That's an original 1975 poster.
I'll be right
Cool.
over.
And I got a Reader's Digest condensed version of it that I stole from a hotel once back there too, which I'm pretty stoked about. Illustrated. They gave Quint a great beard.
Hey, Jeremy, are you going to be, I know you don't have a film this year, but are you going to swing into the Lovecraft Film Festival by any chance?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to try to make Saturday this year. I mean, I always love just going, period, even if I'm not have something on. So, yeah.
I might
Philip's
pop
gonna
up.
be there.
I might pop up for that. So, Jeremy, I would love to hang out if you're there.
Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorites, and it's super close.
Yeah.
So, I love that.
All right, well, Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was really great talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
Philip and everybody else, thanks for the great questions for Jeremy. Ben and Kelly, I'm sorry that you're so wrong about episode 7, but we're still friends. And like I said, Tim Wagner next week, and we will see you again. See you then. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.